Every year before Aseret HaDibra, the mayor of Permishloner would stand up in front of his kihila and tell them the following story. There was a Rav in Vienna over 300 years ago, Rav Aaron Wertheimer. And Rav Aaron was close with the king in Vienna. And he was called in front of the king, and the king said to him, Rav Aaron, explain to me, why is it that the Jews are still in their exile? What is it that the Jews are being punished for that God can't forgive them already? And he said, I have a simple answer to you. We still haven't been able to rectify the issue that we don't have the proper midot, ben adam lechavero. We don't treat each other kindly. And the king said, that's crazy. There's no way that a God would keep his people punished for so many hundreds of years, thousands of years over that he would have to get over it by now. That it can't be that you're still suffering from this either. You must have learned your lesson. He said, no, that's the real story. And he said, I'll give you 3 days to come back and give me the real story. I'm not accepting it. Rav Aaron went home, he went to sleep, and he had a dream. And in the dream, he had a dream that said, you gave the correct answer, you shouldn't change your answer. In the meantime, the king went out hunting in the woods. And while he was hunting, he got separated from his guardsmen. The guardsmen couldn't find the king. They looked high and low for him, and they couldn't find him. And they thought to themselves, eventually, it must be that the king went home because we really can't find him. The king, it got dark. He was all alone, didn't know what to do. And he began to walk. He walked until he found a river. Across the river, he saw a town. It was cold, it was dark, and he said, I have to get across the river. He swam across the river in the cold and the dark. He came out, it's the middle of the night, he comes down to this town soaking wet and cold, and he starts knocking on doors to try to see if somebody will let him in. Nobody lets him in. Who's going to let in a cold, wet person who they don't know is the king in the middle of the night? And eventually he says, I'm going to look for a door with a mezuzah. The Jews are very kind people. I'm sure that they'll let me in. Sure enough, the first house he goes to, he knocks on the door, and it's a Jewish home, and they let him in, and they're extremely hospitable to him. There's a long story in terms of what happens in the house, but to make a long story short, he ends up not revealing his identity, but having the homeowner bring him back to Vienna. They're driving back to Vienna in the Jew's carriage, and the Jew says, where do you want to go? He says, I want to go to the palace. The palace, I'm going to get killed in the palace if I go straight to the palace. Then the king, without revealing his identity, said, don't worry, I know the king very well, it'll be fine. Eventually, they get to the palace, and it becomes revealed to him that the person that he's been hosting all this time is actually the king. And the king says to him, I want to thank you for everything you've done for me, and you saved my life, and you brought me back, and you trusted me even though it was at a great risk to your life. And he said, what can I give you? I'll give you acres of land. I'll give you an entire town. I'll give you whatever you want. And the person said, I don't want any of those things. He said, well, what do you want? There must be one thing I could possibly give you. And he said, actually, the truth is there is something you could give me. Recently, I own a fur store. Recently, another person with a fur store opened up in our town. If you can, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could put out an edict that no other fur store can open up in my town. The king sighed, and he said, Aaron Wertheimer was correct, that people like this who can't understand that there's room for everybody to operate and that they have some type of jealousy that they harbor towards one another, it must be that God truly is holding them back and holding this still against them because they still haven't been able to conquer it. That Mayor Permishloner would say every year, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. To truly believe Anochi Hashem Elokecha means that Hashem is going to provide you whatever you need. And there's no room for jealousy, and there's no room for argument. We should internalize this message. We should have a Chag Sameach, a good Yantif, a good Shabbos, and we should be Makabel Torah, B'pnimius and B'simcha. Shabbos and Yantif.